In 1976, Michael James traveled to South India in search of the meaning of life. There he found a meditation technique that made him stay for the next 20 years. He's an eminent scholar of Ramana Maharshi and has translated many writings related to Ramana from Tamil to English. His books and YouTube videos inspire spiritual seekers all over the world. To learn more about Michael, click on the links in the description below. Hi, Michael.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being on our show.
Right. Pleasure.
So what is this meditation technique that you learned in South India that captivated you for over 20 years?
To explain that, it needs to be put in context. Firstly, in a certain sense, it can be described as a meditation technique, but it's much more than a meditation technique. It is primarily an investigation. The term that is most commonly used to refer to it is Atma-vichara, which means self-investigation. Of course, in order to investigate ourselves, we need to be self-attentive, or we need to attend to ourselves. And since we are attending to ourselves, in that sense, it can be called a meditation. Sometimes it's referred to as swarupa dhyana, which means meditation on our real nature. What is meant by swarupa, our real nature, is our fundamental awareness of our own existence, I am. Not I am this or I am that. Now our experience of ourself, we experience ourselves as if we were a person. So instead of being aware of ourselves as just I am, we're aware of ourselves as I am Andy or I am Michael. That is, there is an identification. We identify ourselves with the name and form of a person. A person consists of body, mind, body, life, mind, intellect, and will. These are, in Sanskrit, generally referred to as the 5 sheaths, but we experience them collectively as ourself. This is a false identification of ourselves. This is not what we actually are, because if we were actually this body and mind, we couldn't be aware of ourselves without being aware of them. But, for example, now we are in a state that we take to be the waking state. In other states, which we now take to be dreams, we are aware of ourselves as a body, but not this body, some other body. So, since we are aware of ourselves in dream without being aware of this body, and since we're now aware of ourselves without being aware of that dream body, neither of these bodies can be ourselves. That is, if this body were identical with ourselves, we couldn't be aware of ourselves without being aware of this body. Since we are aware of ourselves in waking, in dream and sleep without being aware of this body cannot be ourselves. Likewise with the dream body. So what about the mind? It seems to be more or less the same mind that we experience as ourselves in both these states. But there is a third state in which we are aware without being aware of ourselves as a mind. We are not aware in sleep. Sleep is often taken to be a state of non-awareness, unconsciousness. But it is not actually a state of unconsciousness. What is absent in sleep is awareness of anything other than ourselves. But we are aware of our own existence in sleep. That's why when we wake up from sleep, we say, I slept happily. That is our fundamental awareness of our own existence, I am, remains in sleep in the absence of everything else. So since this fundamental awareness of us, of our own existence, I am, we experience that in waking, in dream, and in sleep. That is the only common denominator between these 3 states of experience. So since we experience ourselves as I am in all these 3 states, that alone is what we actually are. So the purpose of Atma-vichara, or self-investigation, is to experience ourselves as just I am, even now in the waking state. Instead of now we are aware of ourselves as I am this person. In order to be, so long as we're attending to things other than ourselves, we seem to be a person. This false identification of ourselves as a person, I am this person, I am this body, is what is called ego. That is the pure awareness I am, mixed with adjuncts, as this body and mind, these 5 sheaths. So our aim is to experience I am in its purity. In order to experience in its purity, we need to withdraw our attention from all other things and focus our entire attention on ourself alone. Ourself here means only that awareness I am, not the thoughts, not the feelings, because they are all objects. But the body is an object perceived by us. All the thoughts that constitute the mind are objects perceived by us. Everything other than ourself is an object perceived by us. But who am I, the one who is aware of all these things? To whom do all these things appear? That is what we are trying to investigate. It is not a matter of asking questions, but of looking deep within to see what is the reality behind this subject, behind this ego.
So, sometimes people talk about ego as if it's something negative that can be contrast with something positive, right? So people, oh, you know, he's so full of ego, meaning he's negative, or he is, you know, full of himself, or things like that. But it seems to me that from what you said, the definition of ego is beyond that. That it's not, it seems like even people who are positive, who are happy, you know, who are, that they also could have ego. Is there such a distinction?
Yeah. Well, but ego is a false identification. We identify ourselves with something that we are not. We identify ourselves as a person. When we talk about a person having a strong ego, we mean they are very wrapped up in themselves as a person. So in other words, the identification is very strong. The stronger the identification, if I take myself to be this person and only this person, why should I care about anyone else? Only I matter. That is a person who is full of ego. But even when we are more humble, more caring about others and everything, we still experience ourselves as a subject. We experience a distinction between ourselves and others. So long as we experience any distinction between ourselves and others, other things or other people, we have limited ourselves. That limited feeling of I, in other words, that I mixed with adjuncts, is ego. So that which is aware of all phenomena, that which is aware of everything other than ourselves, that is ego. So the distinction between waking and dream on the one hand and sleep on the other hand, in sleep, ego has dissolved back into its source, albeit only temporarily, whereas in waking and dream, ego is there as the subject, experiencing everything else. So ego is that which is aware, that is two defining characteristics of ego. As ego, we are always aware of ourselves as I am this body, and consequently we're aware of things other than ourselves. Because when we're aware of ourselves as I am this body, we have limited ourselves. When we've limited ourselves, other things seem to exist. But even those other things are not actually other than ourselves. What actually exists is only ourselves. But because we have imposed this limitation on ourselves by rising as ego, there seems to be a distinction between self and other, between subject and object.
So this self-inquiry.
Yes.
The goal of this self-inquiry is to destroy the ego?
Dissolution of ego, yes.
So, is it possible to be in the waking state without the ego?
There's a lot more needs to be explained. No, but the truth is, waking and dream states exist only in the view of ego. In the view of pure awareness, that is, the nature of pure awareness is said to be Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat means what actually exists. Chit means what is actually aware. And Ananda means perfect happiness. Sat, Chit, Ananda has no limits. It's the unlimited whole. That is the source from which we rise as ego. Once we rise as ego, everything else seems to exist, because ego is a limitation of ourselves. We limit ourselves within the confines of this body. This body is limited in time and in space. And it's also limited in Sanskrit, they say it's kala desa vastu. Kala means it's limited in time. Desa means in place. Vastu means in thing. So because I take myself to be this body, I'm different from every other thing. I'm different from this PC in front of me. I'm different to you who I see on my PC screen. I'm different to all the objects around me. So all these limitations are there once we take ourselves to be a body. So our aim is, by annihilating ego, by dissolving ego back into its source, we will merge back into the infinite whole that we actually are. For the infinite whole, there is no other. The other appears only when you limit yourself. Mm-hmm. So if we are the infinite whole, there cannot be anything other than ourself. So all that we now see as other is actually only ourself.
Well, in that case, to the infinite whole, does this even exist? This world?
Yes. That is about existence. There's also a lot of philosophy about that. One thing, I will refer to Ramana Maharshi as Bhagavan, because that's how we generally refer to him. So one thing Bhagavan often used to say, if something exists at one time and not at another time, it doesn't actually exist even when it seems to exist. So all things that have a temporary existence don't actually exist. They merely seem to exist. Why is that? For a simple reason. If something is intrinsically existent, it must always exist. If something sometimes is existent and sometimes not existent, it is not intrinsically existent. There are analogies that are given to illustrate this. For example, if you have a bowl of hot rice in front of you, that rice is hot, but is it intrinsically hot? No, it's not, because generally rice is not hot, it's generally cold. So from where did it derive its heat? It derived its heat from boiling water. And is that intrinsically hot? No, it is not. It derived its heat from a hot pan. And the pan is not intrinsically hot, because generally the pans are cold. So it derived its heat from fire. Fire is what is intrinsically hot. Because whenever you have fire, it is hot. Mm-hmm. So if something is intrinsic, if a property is intrinsic, it must always be, the thing that has that property must always have that property. If it's a property that comes and goes, it is not an intrinsic property. Existence is like that. There is a philosophical argument that existence is not a property, which is true in a certain sense. But if something is coming into existence and going out of existence, existence in effect is a property, because it's something that it has derived from some other source. Just like the hot rice has derived its heat from boiling water, which derived its heat from a hot pan, which derived its heat from a fire, which didn't derive its heat from anything else, because heat is its nature. Likewise, existence, if existence were actually the nature of something, were the intrinsic nature of something, it must always exist. So the fact is, whatever we experience, all phenomena, they seem to exist so long as we perceive them. So their seeming existence, they derive their seeming existence from the subject, from the perceiver, that is ego. And even ego is not intrinsically existent, because it seems to exist in waking and dream. It doesn't exist in sleep. So from where ego must, since it's not intrinsically existent, it must derive its existence from something that is actually existing. What actually exists is only that fundamental awareness I am, because that exists at all times and in all states. So that is the fundamental reality.
So there are a lot of spiritual teachers nowadays. They also teach self-inquiry.
Yes.
So, and they teach that the perceiver, when let's say you close your eyes and you're perceiving, you're blocking out everything else, and now you're just the perceiver, right? They're saying that perceiver is equal to fundamental reality.
Yeah.
But from what you're telling me, it seems like that perceiver is also not the fundamental reality.
Not the fundamental reality.
So can you
if
explain
that
more
perceiver
about that?
was the fundamental reality, why doesn't it exist in sleep? We exist in sleep, but not as a perceiver. It's only when we limit ourselves, but we perceive things other than ourselves. So underlying the perceiver, there is a pure awareness. Pure awareness means awareness that is not aware of anything other than itself. That is the fundamental reality. That is what we always experience as I am.
So the self-inquiry, is it really inquiring about the perceiver, or is it inquiring directly, trying to perceive the fundamental reality? It seems to me that the latter is not perceivable.
It can be explained in both ways. A simple analogy: supposing you see, of course, this is an objective thing, where what it is analogous to is not objective, but just for illustration, we use analogies. So, if you see a rope, and you mistake it to be a snake, how can you see the reality of that snake? How can you see what that snake actually is? You need to look at the snake very carefully. If you look at the snake carefully enough, you will see it's just a rope. So when you start your investigation, you seem to be looking at a snake. When you look at it carefully enough, you see that actually what you were looking at all along was not a snake, but only a rope. Likewise, we have to start from where we are. Now we seem to be this ego, this mixed awareness, I am Andy or I am Michael. We know Andy and Michael are not real because they come and go. What is permanent in that mixed awareness, I am Andy or I am Michael, is only the fundamental awareness I am. So that is what we are investigating. We can, for the sake of people who didn't understand so deeply, Bhagavan used to say, just investigate ego, that is sufficient. That is like saying, just investigate the snake, that is sufficient. But actually there is no snake there at all. What we take to be a snake is only a rope. Likewise, ego is not real, but it seems to exist. So how do we investigate ourselves? By looking at ego. But when we're looking at ego, we're not looking at the adjunct. We're not looking at Andy or at Michael. We're not looking at the body or the thoughts or anything else. We're looking at the essence of ego, which is I am. So the reality, we are investigating ego to see its reality. What is the reality of ego? Is only I am. So that is what we're investigating.
Are there two egos? Is there one ego of Michael and one ego of Andy?
When you're dreaming, you see a world full of so many people. All those people, you can't deny the fact in your dream there are many people. And one among those many people is the person you seem to be. Because you, the dreamer, mistake yourself to be a person in your dream, you take every other person to be a perceiver. So it seems to you that all the other people in your dream are perceiving the world. And if you ask the people in the world, do you see this world like? They say, of course we see the world. So long as you're dreaming, the seeming existence of other egos is that those other egos are as real as the dream. But when you wake up from the dream, you find there was only one ego who was dreaming.
Now,
so why this is important, that is, in a sense, this is solipsism. Solipsism means the idea that I alone exist. But the problem with solipsism, as it's generally understood, people take it to mean that there's only one person. This is solipsism of a much deeper and subtler. There is only one ego. There is only one perceiver. But because the perceiver takes itself to be a person, so long as we're looking outwards, we experience ourselves as a person. And so we see many other people. And those other people are just as real as the person we seem to be. So supposing we are a person very wrapped up in ourself means as a person, we are totally selfish because we care only about ourselves. We don't care about others. So long as I take care of myself, that's all that matters. So I don't have to worry about other people. That's a very selfish mind that arises out of strong identification of ourselves with the person we seem to be. But when our mind is purer, that identification is less strong. So when, for example, we see other people suffering, it pains us to see other people suffering. Because we see ourselves in that person. So we feel compassion. And so we try to alleviate suffering. So the solipsism, as it is generally understood, could lead to a very selfish outlook, a very self-centered outlook. But this is solipsism of a completely different sort, because according to Bhagavan's teachings, all the other people are as real as the person we seem to be. So we should care about other people. But those other people seem to exist only when we're looking outwards. When we are looking within to investigate ourselves, then we are not aware of others. We are aware only of ourselves. So that is where this idea that there's only one ego, that is where it is useful, because in a dream, supposing in a dream you see a pandemic, so many people are dying of COVID, or you see a famine, or you see a war. Those are terrible things. You may, as the person you take yourself to be in that dream, you want to try and alleviate these things. What is the cure for this pandemic? How do we stop this war? Or whatever. But actually, what is the greatest good you can do? How can you bring that pandemic, that war, that famine, how can you bring them all to an end? By waking up. So now we are investigating ourselves in order to know what we actually are. Knowing what we actually are is equivalent to waking up from a dream.
Isn't it very frightening to wake up? Because that means you lose all your attachments. You lose everything that...
We need not be frightened at all. Because so long as we have attachments, we won't wake up. It is only when we are willing to let go of our attachments but we will be able to wake up. Because this path of self-investigation, it is equally well described, Bhagavan often used to describe it as the path of self-surrender. That is, we have to, in order to know ourselves as we actually are, we need to surrender ourselves. That means we need to give up ourself. There means ego. We need to give up this ego in order to know ourselves as we actually are. So long as you see the rope as a snake, you can never see the rope. You have to be willing to give up the idea that it's a snake in order to see it as a rope. So we must be willing to let go of this ego, this false identification of ourselves, in order to know ourselves as we actually are. So long as we still have strong desires and attachments, there's no danger that we're going to wake up. It is only when we have such great love, but we are willing to surrender ourselves completely, give ourselves up completely, but we will wake up to what we actually are.
And that great love is from whom to whom? From who to whom?
When we are looking outwards, we talk about God. But what actually is God? God is nothing but our own real nature. But because our own real nature is infinite, but because we have limited ourselves as this finite person, our infinite real nature seems to be something other than ourselves. So we take God to be something other than ourselves. So we can say it's love for God, but it's with the understanding that God is not, though God seems to be something other than ourselves when we're looking outwards. Because if I am this little person, Michael, obviously I'm not God. Because how can this little person be God? But God is what I actually am. God is my own reality. So that I am, what I now experience as I am, that pure awareness I am, that is God. That is one of the fundamental principles of the philosophy that is called Vedanta in India. It also happens to be a fundamental teaching in all the Abrahamic religions, because when Moses was in the desert and he saw that burning bush, and a voice said from the burning bush, go and tell the Pharaoh to release my people. He thought, how can I go and tell the Pharaoh? He said, who shall I say has sent me? And God replied, I am that I am. Say that I am has sent you. So in the Judaic tradition, and later it handed down to other Abrahamic religions like Christianity, I am is the fundamental name of God. That is why Jesus why the Jews wanted to execute Jesus, because he said things like, before Abraham was, I am. That is taking the name of the Lord thy God in vain. That's going against the first commandment as they interpreted it. But what actually that means is that what is shining in the heart of each one of us as I am, in other words, our fundamental awareness of our own existence, bereft of the limitation of any adjuncts, that is God. So God is our own real nature. That is, we can view it another way. That is all religions, but all theistic religions, except that God is infinite. No religion will say God is finite, God is limited. Everyone agrees God is infinite. If God is infinite, how can there be anything other than him? If we are something other than God, then God is thereby limited. There's God plus there's Andy. So Andy is thereby limiting God. God is not finite because if he doesn't include it. So God is our own real nature. God is what we actually are. So we seem to be separate from God only because we've limited ourselves as this person. So this path of self-investigation is also the path of surrender, which is the path of supreme devotion. So, because the greatest devotion is to give ourselves to the one we love.
And that is the self.
And that is ourself, yes.
And that's why love is natural.
That is, people generally think of love. There are some theologians who will say love is always for another. But that is overlooking a fundamental fact. What do we each love most of all? We all have greatest love for ourselves. Whatever else we may love, we love it because it contributes to our happiness. So what we all have the greatest love for is for ourselves. So the love we have for ourselves is a clear example of love for not another. So the purest love is the love for not another, but not love for ourselves as a person, but love for ourselves as the infinite whole that we actually are. Love for ourselves as that which embraces everything, that which is the source from which everything has appeared. So this is all encompassing, all embracing love.
There's in Chinese, when there's a phrase 自在. So 自 can be translated as self, and 在 means here or present.
Yeah.
Now, when we use that phrase in Chinese, we don't use it, and we use it every day. It's a mundane term. When we use it, we don't literally. When we use it, we don't mean it as I'm here. We use it to say I'm happy. So when I say I'm 自在, it means I feel so happy. I feel so free.
That's very nice. That is when we are present in ourselves, rather than being present in other things. That is the state of happiness, because happiness is our real nature.
It's interesting that if you look at just the words, it's the words themselves, it doesn't really explain why it would mean happiness. But from hearing your explanation,
yes,
it's natural that self-present would mean happiness.
Yes,
would means freedom.
See, for example, sleep. Are we not all nobody has any complaints about sleep. We all love to sleep. And the more tired we are, the more our love for sleep grows. So sleep is a state we love. But in sleep, where are we? We are just in ourself. There's nothing other than ourself in that state of sleep. So that is a state of being in joy.
In your book, Guru Vachaka Vakai, did I say it correctly?
Guru Vachaka Kovai. Okay.
Guru Kavacha Vakai. This is very interesting verse. It's verse 636. And I'm going to read part of your commentary. It says, since self, the truly existing thing, is beyond the range of mind light. To the mind, it is non-existent. The reason why self is said to be beyond the range of mind light, whose function is thinking and forgetting, is that it is a thing which can neither be thought of nor forgotten, and which can itself neither think nor forget. So self, in this commentary, you're saying that it's something that doesn't think and doesn't forget, and it can't be forgotten, and it cannot be thought of. How do we deal with something like this that's so unapproachable?
Well, it's not unapproachable because you are that. If you think of it, can you ever forget I am? That is the fact that you exist. You never forget that. We may overlook it. When we're interested in other things, we take our own existence for granted. So we are beyond forget, and that is, I am is something that we can never forget. So it is beyond both. Since we cannot forget it, we cannot remember it. But at the same time, it is that which is always shining clearly. Bhagavan often used to give the analogy of a cinema screen. That is, all phenomena are just like pictures appearing on a cinema screen. Whether the pictures appear or don't appear, the screen is always present. So that fundamental awareness I am, it is present in waking and dream when all the pictures are projected on it, and it's equally present in sleep when there are no pictures. But there, in that explanation, it was referred to the mind light. The mind light means light is there used as a metaphor for awareness. So the nature of the mind is always to be looking outwards, always to be looking, as mind or ego, we're always looking away from ourselves towards other things. So the mind light is used for knowing things other than ourselves, knowing objects. But what happens if the light is turned, the light of the mind has no light of its own. It derives its light, just like it derives its existence from pure awareness. It also derives its awareness from pure awareness. Like from pure being and pure awareness is often called Sat Chit. Sat means what actually exists, and Chit means what is actually aware. So the mind borrows the mind or ego. Here I'm using mind in the sense of ego. That is the subject, the perceiver, because mind has two aspects. It's both the subject and the objects. All the thoughts are objects. Ego is the subject. So in the sense of subject or ego, it borrows its existence and its awareness from Sat Chit. And it uses that awareness to be aware of things other than itself, because it's looking outwards. If that attention of the mind, which is looking outwards and thereby illumining the seeming existence of other things, if that awareness is turned back, if that attention is turned back within to the source of its light, the pure awareness I am, what will happen? Supposing you've got a torch, you can, in a dark room, you can see objects. But supposing you go out in the sunlight and shine your torch at the sunlight, or better than a torch, let's say you've got a mirror. You've got a mirror, you can reflect the light of the sun into a dark room, into a cave or something, and you can see objects in that cave. But if you turn the mirror back to face the sun, what happens to the reflected light? Can you say that the reflected light is illumining the sun? No, it's not. The reflected light it merges back into the sunlight. It merges back into its source. Likewise, when the mind turns its attention back to face itself, to face the light within, the light of pure awareness I am, it merges in that. It becomes one with that. Or even more precisely, it ceases to be separate from that, because it's not a matter of becoming one, because we are always one with that, but we cease to seem separate.
So going back to the analogy with the snake and the rope, and combining that with this analogy with the sun and the mirror, doesn't it seem like now we are saying that the rope becomes conscious of itself, that it's actually not a snake? It's light is being reflected back on the sun. I'm actually not a snake, I'm a rope.
That is the analogies always have shortcomings. No analogy is ever perfect. And here, whatever analogies we use, we can only use objective analogies. That is, the rope is an object, the seeming snake is an object, the mirror is an object, the sun is an object. So we can only talk about objects, but so these analogies are all imperfect. No analogy is ever perfect. So we cannot, we can try and imagine, but the rope has seen itself as a snake, and it has to look at itself to see that it's a rope. But that becomes a bit, we're stretching our imagination a bit far.
Going back to this self-inquiry.
But one important thing about that, the snake rope analogy, one important thing to bear in mind, the rope appears as a snake. But in order to appear as a snake, there must be something in whose view it is appearing. That is, if all this world is just an appearance, to whom does it appear? That awareness to which all these things appear, that is ego. If ego, instead of facing outwards to look at all these things, turns back to face within, to see the source of its own light, it will merge back into that source, like the mirror, like the light reflected from the mirror, and thereby it merges back into its source. It ceases to be something separate.
How do people know they are doing self-inquiry correctly?
It's not a simple matter of doing correctly or not correctly, because it is, to use another analogy, but it's like all analogies, it's imperfect. Mm-hmm. Now, so to speak, our attention is facing outwards. It's facing away from ourselves towards other things. We are trying to turn our attention away from other things back towards ourselves. So, metaphorically speaking, we're trying to turn 180 degrees. Because of our desires and attachments, we are not completely willing to let go of our awareness of other things. So that means we are not turning the full 180 degrees. We are trying to turn a full 180 degrees, but we may be succeeding only in turning 10 degrees or 20 degrees or 30 degrees. It doesn't matter. So long as we are, that is, the more we practice this, the more we will, our attachments to other things will lose their strength, and our love to know ourselves will increase. So we will gradually, by practice, we'll be able to turn more and more and more, until one day we will manage to turn the full 180 degrees. When we turn 180 degrees, we thereby cease to be aware of anything other than ourselves. So we are then aware of ourselves as pure awareness. When ego experiences itself as pure awareness, it ceases to be ego. Because ego is not pure awareness. Ego is an adjunct mixed awareness. So when that adjunct mixed awareness turns back to face the original awareness, the pure awareness, it loses itself in that. That is how the dissolution or eradication or annihilation of ego is brought about. And what then remains is the original light, which is what now appears as all this.
Some people will say, and this has actually been asked in a Buddhist sutra before called Yun Gok Ging, and now loosely translated as the Sutra of Complete Awakening. So the question is, so one of the bodhisattvas is we can loosely translate it as an enlightening being. Yeah. These cosmic beings that they roam the universe, and he asked the Buddha, well, if self-awareness is so perfect already, if it's so perfect, then why do we need to practice? Why should we practice to reach liberation if self-awareness is already so eternally complete and perfect?
Yes.
So same question, if the self is already so perfect to begin with, why would Michael James or Andy Chu, why should we practice self-inquiry?
Because we have now, though the pure awareness is perfect, we have now, in our view, we who are pure awareness have seemed to have risen as ego. Pure awareness is actually immutable. It never changes. But some spurious entity called ego has risen, borrowing the light of pure awareness and borrowing the form of name and form of Andy, saying, I am Andy. That which says I am Andy is neither the pure I am, nor is it Andy. It's something in between. Because Andy is just the name of a body and mind. Body and mind are objects, so they are what is called jada. Jada means they're not aware. But there's this spurious I, called ego, but rises saying, I am Andy. Mm-hmm. Since it says I am Andy, it is not that original pure awareness I am. So it has borrowed the existence and awareness of I am, and it borrows the name and form of Andy and mixes these two together. So for ego, there is a problem, because though their truth is the pure awareness alone exists, as ego, we seem to exist as a separate entity. And there seems to be this world outside, and we seem to be a mortal body. Now we are living in a body. We know this body is day by day getting older, and it's not going to last forever. In 100 years' time, all these bodies that are here now are going to be gone. And if we leave a world, if we don't destroy the world beforehand, there'll be another set of people there. So we know all this is all of our present life is just a fleeting appearance. Mm-hmm. Whether it is an actual dream or not, it is very much like a dream. We are here one day, we're gone the next day. So it's all a fleeting appearance. None of this has any substantial reality. It's just an appearance. What is real? What is enduring? Only what always exists actually exists. What always exists is only I am. That fundamental awareness of our own existence.
Now, in your book and several other, the numerous books about Bhagavan, there are various terms used to denote self or to denote the ego. There's I, there's I-ness. I've seen I-I. I've seen M-ness, like A-M, A-M-N-E-S-S. So it becomes very confusing to readers who read several different books. And sometimes even within the same book, there's these different terms. So how do we make sense of these different terms that kind of refer to I, kind of refer to the ego?
Okay. The subject we are talking about is a subject that is actually beyond that is language and thought is about objects. But we are talking about that which is not an object, but the reality of the subject. So it is actually beyond thought, the reach of thought and words. So when we are communicating in words, at best they can only be pointers. So whatever words Bhagavan has used, he has used them as pointers. And he used very simple words. He used words like, in Tamil, the word for self is tan. The closest English translation is oneself. But it's often translated as the self. And sometimes people put a capital S. But in Tamil, there are no capitals and there are no definite articles. So Bhagavan is simply talking about oneself. But we need to understand from the context when he is referring to our real nature and when he is referring to ego. Sometimes there are some verses, for example, he's written a poem called Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, 40 verses on what is. There are some verses there, but in the same sentence, he uses the word tan, oneself, several times. We need to read it very carefully to understand when he's referring to our real nature and when he's referring to ego. He's not doing this to confuse us, but he's doing this to make it clear that this is a very subtle subject. Actually, there are no two selves. That people think of the big self and the little self, or the supreme self and the individual self. There is only one self. There is only one I. That when that one I remains just as I am, without any adjuncts, that is our real nature. When it is conflated with adjuncts, that is ego. So it's not two different I. Just like the snake and the rope. There are not two things there. The rope seems to be a snake. That pure awareness I am seems to be mixed up with adjuncts. But actually it's never mixed. Just like the screen is... Bhagavan often used to say, on a cinema screen, if there's a film of a raging forest fire, the screen isn't burnt. If there's a film of a flood, the screen doesn't become wet. So the screen is ever untouched by whatever appears on it. So ego and all ego perceives are just like an appearance on the screen. They don't touch the screen. So that pure awareness I am is ever untouched by these things. The whole problem is for this spurious entity called ego, but has usurped the existence and awareness of Satchit, of I am, and usurped the name and form of a body, conflated them together, and then says, oh, I have so many problems. I'm born, one day I'm sick, I'm going to die, I've got my taxes to pay, I've got to feed my family, I've got all these bills to pay. And so we face so many problems, all because we have limited ourselves. The solution to all these problems is to turn back within and dissolve, thereby dissolve into the source from which we appeared. For that source, there never was any problem. And that source is what we actually are.
Can you help, let's say, someone who has never done self-inquiry before? Can you take us to the basic steps of beginning self-inquiry?
I think the key to practicing self-inquiry correctly is to have a clear understanding, because people often say, I can't find the I. Mm-hmm. If you say something like, I can't find the I, that is clearly betrays you as if you're looking for some I that is other than yourself. The I that cannot find the I is itself the I that it thinks it cannot find. So we need to have a clear understanding of what the teaching is, and the understanding of the teaching will we will understand the practice to the extent to which we've understood the teaching. So what we are investigating is not an object. All objects, anything that appears and disappears, anything that appears and disappears is something other than ourself. So we are trying to attend not to anything that appears and disappears. We're trying to attend to that which is permanent. That is that fundamental awareness I am. That's one thing to be understood. The other thing is, all objects appear to whom? They appear to me. So it is that me to whom all phenomena, all objects appear, but we are trying to investigate. So we are not looking for an object to investigate. We are trying to turn our attention away from objects back to the one to whom all objects appear. What is it that is aware of all these objects? So it's a very simple practice, but at the same time a very deep and subtle practice. So we can learn how to practice this only by trying. That is, if we think carefully about the clues, the pointers that Bhagavan has given us, and try to apply them in practice, we will slowly find our way. Like how can you teach someone how to ride a bicycle? You can give one or two clues. You have to sit on a bicycle. You've got to balance yourself, but you cannot adequately explain in words. There's only one way to learn to ride a bicycle. You have to get on the bicycle. You have to fall over many times, and slowly you get the hang of it. You learn how to balance. And once you know how to balance, it's so obvious. I mean, it's so, how could I ever have not known how to ride a bicycle? It's so easy. Likewise with this practice, we will stumble at first. We will struggle. But if we think carefully about the clues that are given and try to put it into practice, and most importantly of all, to remember we are not looking for any object. We are trying to see the screen on which all objects appear. We are trying to see that to which all objects appear.
Is there an end to self-inquiry?
Yes, the dissolution of ego. So when we are aware of ourself as pure and unlimited awareness, being an awareness, that is the end.
And that is
So
liberation.
long as we are aware of the seeming existence of anything other than ourselves, we are limited. Therefore, we are still ego.
I remember reading somewhere that Bhagavan said people take self-inquiry only as a method, but it is also the goal. What would that mean?
What that mean? That is, he didn't actually. I think what he said is, we ourselves are both the path and the goal. That is, if the path was something, if the path were of a different nature to the goal, it couldn't lead to the goal. So what is our real nature? Our real nature is pure awareness. Pure awareness means awareness that is aware of nothing other than ourselves. So how to be aware of nothing other than ourselves? Only by attending to ourselves, because the more we attend to ourselves, the more other things we draw into the background of our awareness, into the periphery of our awareness. And when we attend to ourselves so keenly that we're aware of nothing other than ourselves, that is the state of pure awareness. So the path, which is just trying to be attentively self-aware, is itself the goal. Because the goal is the state of perfect and eternal self-awareness. Pure self-awareness, awareness of nothing other than ourselves.
Is awareness something different from existence?
No. There is a verse 23 of Upadēśa Undiyār, in which Bhagavan says, because of the non-existence of any awareness other than what exists itself is awareness. Awareness alone exists as ourself, as we. What that means is if awareness was something other than what exists, it would be a non-existent awareness. Because what is other than what exists doesn't exist. So a non-existent awareness couldn't be aware of what exists. And if what exists were not aware, it would exist only in the view of some other awareness. In other words, its existence would be dependent upon some awareness other than itself. So to talk of an awareness that is other than what exists, or what exists as being anything other than awareness, is meaningless. Because when we say something exists, even about objects, when we say something exists, we say this world exists, for example. Why do we say the world exists? What evidence do we have that the world exists? Because it appears in my awareness. But to suppose that there's any existence independent of awareness is there's no reason to suppose that anything could exist independent of awareness, because we say things exist only because we're aware of them, directly or indirectly. For example, we are aware that Moscow is the capital of Russia. We are not directly experiencing that, but that's some information that we've heard many times, and we think it's reliable information. So we think, well, yes, I'm aware Moscow is the capital of Russia. So, but that, without something to be aware of that, I mean, that's something that we're indirectly aware of. There are also things that we're directly aware of. We're aware of the computer screen in front of us. We're aware of the air around us. We're aware of the chair we're sitting on. We're aware of so many things. So we are directly aware of some objects, indirectly aware of some other objects. But we say those objects exist only because we're either directly aware of it or indirectly aware of it. Scientists tell us that so many billions of years ago, there was a Big Bang, and that's when all the trouble started, according to them. That Big Bang, could that exist? That is, it's in our mind that we have this idea there was a Big Bang. So everything is depending upon something to be aware of it. Actually, for us, what is Big Bang? It's just an idea. It's not, no one has actually experienced that Big Bang. There may be evidence, but even that evidence that the scientists find for it, that is also ideas. All of them depend upon, if there wasn't a mind, there couldn't be any idea about Big Bang or about any evidence for a Big Bang. That mind is not the original awareness, because that mind appears in waking and dream, disappears in sleep. No scientist knows anything about the Big Bang in sleep. Only in waking and dream they've got this idea of it. So everything that seems to exist because it appears in awareness, directly or indirectly. So to say that anything could exist independent of awareness is a mere supposition. There's something there can never be any evidence that anything exists independent of awareness. So existence depends upon awareness, and awareness depends upon existence, because if awareness didn't exist, there couldn't be any, it wouldn't be. So awareness and existence are, if we think deeply about the matter, they are one and the same thing.
Then where does bliss come from?
Existence, what exists in Sanskrit is called sat. Awareness is what is called chit. That is pure being or pure existence is sat. Pure awareness is chit. When we remain just as pure being and pure awareness, as for example we are in sleep, we are then perfectly happy. That is, misery or dissatisfaction rises only with the mind. In the absence, there's no mind in sleep, so sleep is a perfectly happy state. So, but happiness is the very nature of Sat Chit. Unhappiness is just an appearance, but that appearance arises because we have risen as ego. And that is, happiness is our real, infinite happiness is our real nature. But as ego, we have limited ourselves as this person. So as this finite person, we cannot experience infinite happiness. So because infinite happiness is our real nature, we are always dissatisfied. We are always looking for infinite happiness, but not finding it. We think if I get a better job, I'll be happy. If I have a nicer wife, I'll be happy. If my children behave better, I'll be happy. If I got a better car or a bigger house, I'll be happy. Or if I was more famous, I'll be happy. We think our happiness depends on these other things. But in the absence of all these things, we are perfectly happy in sleep. The reason we are seeking happiness in things other than ourselves, because we've limited ourselves, we see things that seem to be other than ourselves, and we think our happiness depends on those things. Some things contribute to my happiness. If I'm healthy and wealthy, then I'm happy. If I'm sick and I'm poor, then I'm unhappy. We think this is our idea. So, but what is actually the cause? Because we have this idea, but if I'm healthy, that will bring about happiness. If I'm wealthy, then I'll have more security, so I'll be more happy. We think these things, so we like to be healthy. We like to be wealthy. So when we are not healthy and wealthy, we are dissatisfied. Even if we, by good fortune, we become healthy and wealthy, we'll still be dissatisfied. Because, okay, I'm healthy now, but supposing I get sick tomorrow. So how can I insure myself against, there's no way. However much we exercise and eat a healthy food, when disease comes, it comes. It may reduce our chances of getting disease, but even the healthiest people get disease sometimes. And as far as wealth is concerned, whether you have $1,000 or $1 million or $1 billion, you still want more. Because that $1 billion one day you can have $1 billion, next day you can lose it because you invested all in the stock market and the stock market crashes and you've lost all your billions. So we look for security in wealth and these things, but there's no security in anything. because so long as we are a body, where is security? The next moment we could have a heart attack, or we could walk across the road and be hit by a bus. So looking for, we are in search of illusions. The illusion of security, the illusion of being healthy. None of these things are permanent. They're all transitory. We separate ourselves from all these things. However rich you may be, or however poor you may be, however healthy you may be, or however sick you may be. You're separated from it all every night when you fall asleep, and you're perfectly happy. So why should we depend upon these things? We depend upon these things because of desire. When we get the things we like, it seems to make us happy, at least temporarily. When we get the things we dislike, it seems to cause us pain. But what is actually the cause of that seeming happiness and seeming pain? It's our likes and dislikes. If we had no likes and dislikes, it wouldn't matter whether we're healthy or sick. It wouldn't matter whether we're rich or poor. Nothing would matter. Why things matter to us because of our likes and dislikes. And our likes and dislikes arise because we have limited ourselves. So I like the things that seem to be good for me. I dislike the things that seem to be bad for me.
But isn't it human to feel sadness? For example, even Bhagavan cried when Lakshmi the cow died.
Well, he didn't cry about Lakshmi, but he did sometimes cry when people came and told stories of calamities in their life.
Right.
He would sometimes cry. But remember, when we are talking about Bhagavan in this way, we are talking about a person. That is a person, their body and mind. According to Bhagavan, that person we take him to be exists only in our view. In his view, he is not the body or mind. He is that infinite Satchidananda. So all that we say about that is because Bhagavan said, because you take yourself to be a person, because you take yourself to be a body and mind, you take me to be a body and mind. So whatever we say about Bhagavan as a person is only from our ignorant perspective. What he actually is infinite happiness, infinite love. That is, but that though he is not that person, his real nature in some way reflected through the person that he seemed to be. For example, in the last year or so of his life, he had sarcoma. That is a tumor growing on the nerve. That is an extremely painful form of cancer. Whatever medicines are given, you cannot alleviate the pain of that. That was operated on 3 times. He was conscious through all those operations. I don't know, there's some dispute about whether he was given local anesthesia, whether he was given general anesthesia. Some people say he was given general anesthesia for the last operation. Whatever it is, even after, he definitely, the first 1 or 2 operations were not done under general anesthesia. And even after the operation is over, the anesthesia wears off, still the pain will be there. So people asked him, Bhagavan, are you not feeling pain? Because he's perfectly happy and smiling and everything. They said, are you not feeling pain? He said, yes. It's like if you crush 1,000 usi mulahai, the small little chili, a really hot chili. If you grind 1,000 of them and make a paste and put it on the wound, it is like that. But he said, but that pain is not other than me. So his real nature is infinite happiness. So even that pain doesn't touch him. It is a mere appearance. And we think it appears in his view, but actually its appearance in his view is only in our view. It's only we who say, oh, he's a body, he's got sarcoma, it must be terrible pain. But up to the end, he was smiling and he was unaffected by all this, by the terrible pain that the body was in.
So going back to that question, how do we deal with our human sadness? We attach to our spouse, our children. If something bad happened to them,
this is the price we pay for rising as ego. That is, the embodied existence is a mixture of pleasure and pain, happiness and sadness. With our family, we have many happy times, but we also have many unhappy times. There are problems. As individuals, we face problems. As families, we face problems. In every family, sooner or later there'll be bereavement, there's sadness. It is the nature of embodied existence. So long as we are attached to this embodied existence, we will inevitably experience sadness and things. We have to reconcile ourselves to this. But now, because of our attachments, we are not ready to surrender ourselves completely. But we are now, if we are trying to follow this path of self-investigation and self-surrender, we are trying to detach ourselves. We are trying to slowly wean ourselves off our attachments. It doesn't mean that we won't feel sad and things. So long as there's the slightest trace of attachment, there will be sadness. This is part of the human condition. Human condition means ego condition, because even if we were not experiencing ourselves as a human body, we may experience ourselves as an animal body. But animals also feel sadness. When you can see if a mother dog or cow loses one of their babies, they feel sad. All creatures feel sad, because whatever creature we may take ourselves to be, whether a human or a non-human creature, we have limited ourselves as a certain name and form. And as that name and form, we have attachments, and we have likes, and we have dislikes, and so we have to experience all the consequences of embodied existence. So we should think deeply about these things. Is this what we really want? Or do we want, when will we be willing to let go of all these things and to remain as the infinite happiness that we actually are? Now we are not ready. That's why we're still here. We're still talking about these things. But slowly, by this practice, we are trying to wean ourselves off our attachments. That doesn't mean we're trying not to love our family. So long as we experience ourselves as this body, naturally we love our wife or husband, we love our parents, we love our children. All these things, these are inevitable. We can't escape from these things, so long as we take ourselves to be a person. So long as you experience yourself as I am Andy, Andy has parents, Andy has siblings, Andy has wife or children, or even if you've got no relatives, you'll have friends, we all have relationships of one kind or another. So, and we naturally, when our friends or relatives pass away, or if they're sick or anything, we feel it. This is just the nature of the embodied condition.
So, how has Bhagavan given any clues about what's one's proper relationship to his job or his career, or her job or her career?
That is, what Bhagavan has said is, whatever we are to experience in this lifetime is preordained. And whatever we are to do in order to experience what is preordained, we'll be made to do. So, for example, it's your destiny to have a certain job. So you will be made to do these things. So all that is going to happen, it's all predetermined. People with a superficial understanding and once jump to the conclusion, if everything is predetermined, then there's no freedom of will. That is not what Bhagavan said. Bhagavan said, there is predetermination, there is also freedom of will. They are two separate domains. That is what we are to experience, and what we are to do in order to experience that is preordained. But at the same time, we have likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, the root of which are what he calls Vishaya vasanas. That is, Vishaya means objects or phenomena. Vasana means inclination. So those inclinations rise as likes, dislikes, which further the inclinations are like the seeds. The seeds they sprout. The sprout is called likes and dislikes. A bit more sprouted form is called desires and attachment, and it expands as all this. So so long as we allow our attention to go outwards, we are under the sway, to a greater or lesser extent, under the sway of our vasanas. So whatever we do according to our vasanas, that is what in the technical terminology of the law of karma is called agamya. That is, the actions we do under the sway of our vasanas are called agamya. Agamya are the actions that bear fruit. Those fruit get stored in what is called sanchita, which means a heap or pile. And from that, in each lifetime, God or Guru selects what we are to experience in that lifetime. What is selected by God and Guru is what is most conducive to our spiritual development. So whatever we are to experience in this lifetime, we cannot avoid experiencing it. Whatever we are not to experience, we cannot experience it, however much we may try. I may want to be very rich or very learned, or I may want to be a professor or a industrial magnate or a scientist or something. I may want that, but if it's not my destiny, it's not going to happen. So predetermination determines what we are to experience. That is the domain of predetermination. Our will determines what we want to experience. So they're two different domains. What you experience is not going to change what you want to experience. What you want to experience is not going to change what you are to experience. So the two go hand in hand in our life.
Right. Is there a way?
So you're coming back to your question about your career, that is already predetermined. But you should have such and such a career. So let it just go on.
I asked this question because, NIMSA, the company that supports this podcast, is helping people take time off from work for their health problems. And a lot of people who watch these channels, they have problems with work. And one of the problems is they don't know what to do with their life. They don't know what to do with their career. They feel lost in their career. Yeah. So does the practice of self-inquiry, does that help us align with what we want, with what is predetermined?
Yes. That is,
so that it decrease suffering overall.
As I said, the path of self-investigation is also the path of surrender. In order to surrender, that is our ultimate aim, is to surrender ourselves. But in order to surrender ourselves, we need to be willing to surrender our will. Because so long as I've got strong likes and dislikes, I want this, I don't want that, I'm not going to surrender myself. So our likes, dislikes, desires and attachments are what stand between us and complete surrender. So if we are following this path of self-investigation and self-surrender, we should be accepting that whatever happens in our life is what is good for us. So we may have a job, but we don't particularly want to do that job. But so long as it's our destiny to do that job, we will do it. So let us just accept it. Okay, this is the job I have to do. Let me do it to the best of my ability. There's a saying, I think, happiness, this is not particularly spiritual, but it's also a little bit spiritual. Happiness lies not in doing what you want to do, but in wanting to do what you... No. Happiness lies not in doing what you like to do, but in liking what you... but in liking whatever you do. So we just have to accept, if it's our destiny to do a job but doesn't particularly, it's not the job we would choose, okay, it's our destiny. So let us, in any job we do, we are interacting with people. We can make some contribution by maybe smiling to someone who's looking a little bit depressed, or just being kind, being considerate, trying to do whatever mundane work we may have, whether it's sweeping the street or working in a call center or whatever it may be. We try to do it to the best of our ability. That's all we can do. And what's most important is that we accept whatever happens, it is happening for my own good. Even if I'm in a job that doesn't interest me, that may not seem good to me from a material point of view, but from a spiritual point of view, accepting that is good for me. So everything that we experience is an opportunity for us to surrender, to accept whatever is to be.
It's possible to do self-inquiry while one is working?
Yes. Because whatever we may be doing, we are always aware I am. The problem is, though we are always aware I am, generally we are so interested in other things, we neglect I am. We just take it for granted. So whatever work we may be doing, whether work by body, speech or mind, I am is always there in the background. So even in the midst of work that maybe involves our attention, we can still be holding on at least to a tenuous current of self-attentiveness. We can have that in the background. Because, and another way of putting this, we think that, I don't have time for this self-attentiveness. But if we actually observe ourselves throughout our day, the vast majority of the thoughts we think are not immediately necessary. Even while we're working, so many thoughts will be going through our mind, but are not directly related to our work. We may be thinking of problems at home. We may be thinking of where we're going on holiday or things. Those thoughts are going on in the background, even when we're doing our work. So if we replace all unnecessary thoughts with self-attentiveness, even in the midst of so many activities, we can hold on to that self-attentiveness. Another way I explain this, supposing a friend of yours has caught COVID and is in hospital on life support system. The doctors can't say whether your friend is going to survive or not, and even if they survive, whether there are going to be long-term effects or anything. So you are so concerned about your friend, whatever work you may be doing, the thought of your friend will often be coming to your mind. It'll be there in the background of your mind all the time. Are they going to survive? Are they going to be better? Are we going to have good times again together? Are we going to laugh and joke as we always used to? All these thoughts will be going through your mind, even though it won't be impairing your ability to work. You can still be working, but that thought of your friend is there in the background of your mind. If we had so much liking to know what we actually are, but if we had so much concern to know what we actually are, as we have for our friend, we could be self-attentive, even in the midst of whatever work we may be doing. It all comes down to love, what we are concerned about. If we are much interested in the world, in outward things, our mind will be going outwards and we won't be attending to ourselves. So we are slowly trying to wean our mind off its preoccupation with external things. That doesn't mean we don't care about external things, because we understand what is going to happen. That all the external happenings are according to destiny. So they will happen whether we attend to them or not. Go ahead. No, that's okay.
Some people might consider self-inquiry too complicated. And they say, I love Bhagavan, I just want to think of him all the time, night and day.
Yes.
Is that enough? Is that sufficient for the path?
Firstly, to think that self-investigation is complicated shows a fundamental misunderstanding. It is actually the simplest state there is. Attending to anything other than ourself is complicated because you've got a subject, you've got an object, and you've got the attention between them. Whereas being self-attentive, you've only got one. The I who is attending, the I that is attended to, and the attention are all one and the same thing. So it's a state of perfect oneness. So there's nothing simpler than oneness. So it is not complicated, firstly. Secondly, yes, it's good to think of Bhagavan with love. But what did Bhagavan teach us? Who is Bhagavan? He taught us that he is not the physical form that he seems to be. He is that which is shining in the heart of each one of us as I. So rather than thinking of him as something other than ourselves, lovingly attending to him in our heart as I am, that is the best way of thinking of him. That doesn't mean we shouldn't think of it. Of course we love Bhagavan because he's given us these beautiful teachings. I can say for myself, I cannot imagine how my life would have been if Bhagavan hadn't come into my life, because it's given a purpose, it's given a direction, it's given a meaning to my life. And I just couldn't imagine how my life would be without Bhagavan. So for me, Bhagavan is everything. That all that I hold dear, it's just, I can say my whole life as Bhagavan, even long before I knew Bhagavan was taking care, was guiding my life. But ever since I've known Bhagavan, I've known that he is shaping my life, and whatever is happening according to his will, and that he's given me beautiful teachings, but are so simple, so perfect, and answer any questions that may be asked. So I have so much love for Bhagavan. And I think anyone who's drawn to Bhagavan will feel the same to a greater or less extent. We can't help but love Bhagavan. So we do think of Bhagavan. We do look at his picture. When we look at his picture, we see his eyes looking at us. But what do his eyes tell us? If we look at a picture of Bhagavan's eyes, we see his eyes looking at us. His eyes are telling us, look back within. This is something I've heard many people say, but when they look at a picture of Bhagavan, his eyes are alive. And what he is telling us is, see yourself.
I read somewhere that Bhagavan said silence is endless speech.
Yes.
Is that silence here today?
You are that silence. If you remove that is what seems to obscure that silence, which is our own real nature, is only our rising as ego. That is that fundamental awareness I am. That is the nature of that awareness is infinite silence. But because we have risen as this spurious entity called ego, we experience all this noise, the noise of all this world, this phenomena. So Bhagavan also said, the real teaching is silence. That is, but why was it necessary for Bhagavan to appear in human form and give us these teachings? It's because our mind is going outwards. So his teachings are turning our attention back to ourselves. All his teachings are pointing back, see yourself. Why does he want us to see ourselves? Because only to the extent that we turn within, we are attuning ourselves to the silence that is our own real nature. So we will discover what we actually are only in the silence of our own heart.
Thank you, Michael.
So his teaching in words is just an expression of that silence. And it's directing us back to that, to where is that silence to be experienced? Only deep in our own heart.